The elevator shuddered, the lights went out, and somewhere above them, 300 wedding guests were waiting for a groom who might never arrive. Lena Harper had planned to spend the morning finishing blueprints, not watching her billionaire boss unravel. But by the time the doors opened, both of their lives would be unrecognizable. The office was almost too quiet for a Saturday morning, the kind of stillness that made every sound feel amplified. The hum of the HVAC system, the tap of Lena Harper's fingers against her keyboard, the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. She was the only one in the design department, the floor-to-ceiling windows stretching along the east wall revealing a Manhattan skyline bathed in pale gold. The city was waking up, but Lena had been awake for hours, mind already running through the revisions she had to finish before Monday. She sipped lukewarm coffee from a paper cup and leaned closer to the screen, her dark hair twisted into a messy knot, the faintest smudge of graphite still on her fingers from sketching late into the night. This was her routine: arrive early, stay late, pour herself into work as if sheer effort could quiet the gnawing ache she carried. The ache of wanting something, someone she couldn't have. Alexander Vale, her boss, her impossible, off-limits, too perfect to think about CEO. The thought of him made her pause, biting the inside of her cheek as she looked at the clock on the wall. 10:15 a.m. By now he should be dressing for the wedding the entire city was talking about. A society event that would merge two dynasties, Vale Developments and Winters Banking, in both love and legacy. The photos would be splashed across magazines by tomorrow morning. The bride, Natasha Winters, was everything Lena wasn't: glamorous, pedigreed, flawless, the kind of woman who belonged at Alexander Vale's side. Lena had to focus on the renderings on her screen, but her eyes blurred. She'd bought a dress for the wedding, the whole office had been invited, but she couldn't bring herself to go. Watching him promise himself to someone else would be the kind of pain she wasn't sure she could recover from. The ding of the elevator startled her, the sound too loud in the empty office. Her heart stuttered in her chest when she saw him step out. Alexander Vale looked like he had stepped out of a magazine spread. Tailored charcoal morning coat, silver waistcoat, dark hair swept back with meticulous precision. He carried himself with the effortless authority of a man who had been born to command boardrooms and headlines. And yet, Lena's trained designer's eye caught what most wouldn't: the slight slump in his shoulders, the faint tension in his jaw, the almost imperceptible shadow under his gray eyes. "Lena," he said, his voice a deep, warm baritone that always seemed to settle low in her chest. "You're still here." She scrambled to sit straighter. "Just finishing the Riverside project revisions," she said quickly, forcing a polite smile. "I wanted to make sure they were ready before Monday. You didn't need to come in today." He took a step closer, scanning the blueprints spread across her desk. "You've done excellent work. I mean that." The words warmed her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't here just to compliment her. "Shouldn't you be getting ready?" she asked softly. "Your wedding's in a few hours." Something flickered in his expression, so quick she almost missed it. "I needed to pick up a few documents," he said finally, his tone neutral but not convincing. Lena hesitated, her stomach twisting with an emotion she couldn't name. Then he surprised her by saying, "Walk with me." She grabbed her coffee and followed him to the elevator bank. The building was eerily still, and now the city's energy muffled at this hour. They stepped inside, the polished brass doors closing them into the small space. Alexander pressed the button for his floor. The elevator hummed to life, and then, with a violent jolt, it lurched to a stop between floors. The lights flickered, then died, plunging them into darkness. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the sound of her own quickened breathing, and the steady, controlled inhale of the man standing inches from her, the man who was supposed to be walking down the aisle in less than an hour. And for the first time in her life, Lena wasn't sure if she was terrified, or if this was the beginning of something she'd been secretly wishing for all along. The emergency lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting the elevator in a dim amber glow that made everything feel smaller, closer. Lena's back pressed against the cool metal wall as she tried to steady her breathing. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Alexander moved first, pulling out his phone and hitting the emergency button on the panel. His voice was steady, clipped. CEO mode. "This is Vale. Elevator is stuck between 37 and 38. What's your status?" He listened, jaw tightening with each word, until he finally said, "Do it safely, and hurry." He hung up, sliding the phone back into his pocket with a sharp movement. "What did they say?" Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Transformer blew on the block," he said grimly. "Backup generators are online, but the elevator system is locked down until maintenance can manually reset it. Estimated repair time." His lips pressed into a hard line. At least 2 hours. 2 hours. Lena's stomach dropped. She glanced at the Rolex gleaming on his wrist. Your wedding starts in 45 minutes, he finished for her, his tone sharp, almost a laugh. He raked a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect styling. For a moment, he looked nothing like the untouchable man on magazine covers. Silence stretched between the thick as the air in the stalled car. Lena lowered herself to the floor, her knees threatening to give out. She set her coffee aside, suddenly nauseous. Alexander paced the small space, the tension rolling off him in waves. I can't just sit here. You don't have a choice, Lena said gently. His phone buzzed, vibrating against the metal wall. He stared at the screen, hesitating just a moment too long before answering. Natasha. Lena turned her head, pretending to study the emergency exit diagram, but there was no escaping the voice that spilled into the elevator. Sharp, frantic, edged with panic. What do you mean you're stuck? Natasha's voice was high, brittle. The guests are already arriving. My father is... I know, Alexander said, his tone clipped, professional. I've called maintenance. They're working on it. You can't just miss our wedding, Alex. There has to be a way to get you out. Call the fire department. Break the doors if you have to. It's not safe, he said firmly. We're between floors. Forcing the doors could get someone killed. A pause, then quieter, more dangerous. You can't let this happen. Not today. Not to me. Lena felt heat rush to her cheeks, the words cutting deep even though they weren't directed at her. I'm doing everything I can, Alexander said, softer now, and there was something in his tone, exhaustion, maybe, that made Lena's chest ache. Natasha said something sharp, too low for Lena to catch, and then the line went dead. Alexander stood still for a long moment, phone still in his hand, before he exhaled hard and pressed it to his forehead. Then with sudden violence, he slammed his fist into the wall, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Lena flinched. Sorry, he said quickly, his voice rough. He stopped, shoulders heaving once, then again. This was not the polished man she saw in board meetings. This was someone raw, someone cornered. Without thinking, Lena spoke. You don't have to pretend with me. His head snapped toward her, surprise flashing across his face. I mean... She swallowed, her throat dry. You don't have to keep it all inside. It's just me. No one else will hear it. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then slowly he lowered himself to sit across from her on the elevator floor. The space between them was barely 2 feet, but it felt like the only safe distance in the world. I've been pretending so long, he said finally, his voice low. I don't even know where the act ends anymore. Something twisted in Lena's chest. Pretending what? His gray eyes found hers, and for the first time, she saw something naked in them. Fear. That this is the life I want. The words hung in the air, heavy as the silence that followed. Lena's breath caught because she knew, without him saying another word, that he wasn't just talking about the elevator or the wedding. And for the first time since the car had stopped, Lena felt something else stir inside her, hot and dangerous. Hope. The amber emergency light flickered once, then steadied, throwing their faces into a chiaroscuro glow. Sharp edges of shadow, warm halos of gold. The hum of the elevator was gone now, replaced only by the sound of their breathing. Alexander stared at the floor for a long time before speaking again, his voice quiet but with an edge that made Lena's heart thud painfully against her ribs. I don't love her. Lena's head jerked up, the words like a physical jolt. I don't love Natasha, he said again, clearer this time like he needed to hear it out loud. His jaw clenched as though even saying the truth came at a cost. I haven't for months, if I ever really did. Lena's fingers curled into the fabric of her skirt. Every instinct told her to stay silent, to keep her face neutral, professional, safe. But the part of her that had been living in quiet agony for 2 years finally stirred. Then why are you marrying her? The question came out sharper than she intended, almost an accusation. Because it's what's expected, he snapped, then immediately closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. Sorry, I didn't mean... No, Lena said quickly, heart pounding. You don't have to apologize, Her throat closed for a moment, but she forced the words out. I don't understand how someone like you could go through with something like this, if it doesn't make you happy. His laugh was short, humorless. Because happiness isn't part of the equation, Lena. This wedding... It's a merger, a press release, a peace treaty between 2 empires. Natasha's father is putting $50 million into my next 3 projects. My board, my family, my investors, they're all counting on this. Lena stared at him, feeling the familiar ache expand into something sharper, almost unbearable. And what about you? Who's counting on you? That made him look at her. really look at her, like he was seeing her for the first time. Silence stretched again, charged now, thick with unspoken things. God, he said finally, leaning back against the wall, his hands dragging down his face. You know what the worst part is? There is someone I want. Someone I can't stop thinking about. Someone who makes me laugh in meetings when I shouldn't be laughing, who challenges every design choice I make like she's daring me to be better. Lena felt her breath leave her body in a rush. He lowered his hands, his gray eyes locking onto hers. It's you, Lena. The world tilted. For a moment, the elevator, the wedding, New York City itself seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them in this small metal box suspended between past and future. You can't mean that, Lena whispered, but her voice was shaking, and she already knew he did. I've tried not to, Alexander said. God, I've tried. I thought if I buried myself in work, if I kept my distance, I could control it. But being in here with you, he broke off, shaking his head. I can't lie about it anymore. Not to you, not to myself. Lena's throat tightened. Alex. Her heart betrayed her before her brain could stop her. The words came tumbling out, raw and unpolished. Do you know how many times I've wished it were me? His breath caught, like she'd struck him. I sit at my desk listening to people talk about your perfect wedding, about Natasha, and I smile and I nod and I tell myself it's fine. But I've been in love with you for 2 years, and every single day I've wished it were me. The words echoed in the cramped space, reckless and impossible to take back. For a moment, Alexander just stared at her, and Lena thought she had gone too far, until he moved. He was on his knees in front of her before she could react, one hand braced against the wall, the other curling against the floor between them. He was so close now that she could smell the faint spice of his cologne, see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. Then maybe, he said softly, it should be. The air between them crackled. Lena's breath came fast, her body humming with adrenaline and something dangerously close to joy. But reality slammed back in like a cold wave. You're supposed to be at the altar in 30 minutes, she said, her voice trembling. And I'm here, Alexander said simplest. He's with you. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers lightly, almost reverently. Tell me I should go through with it, Lena. Tell me to get out of here and marry Natasha and be the man everyone expects me to be. She opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come, because for the first time, she didn't want him to be that man. The elevator was still, but everything inside it was spinning. Duty against desire, fear against freedom, the life Alexander had built against the one he could choose. And for the first time, Lena felt that fate might actually be holding its breath, waiting for their answer. The elevator was so quiet, Lena could hear the faint thud of Alexander's pulse through the floor between them. He still held her hand, his grip tight, as though he feared letting go would make all of this, the truth, the moment her, disappear. The silence broke with a sharp vibration from his phone. Alexander's head dropped forward before he reached for it, thumb hovering over the screen. A text glowed in the dim amber light. His face went pale as he read it. What? Lena asked, her stomach sinking. He turned the screen toward her. The message was from Edward Winters, Natasha's father, a man known as one of the most ruthless financiers in New York. If you're not at the altar by 1:00 p.m., the deal is dead. No greeting, no sympathy, no acknowledgement that his daughter's fiancé was literally trapped between floors, just a line in the sand. Lena's breath hitched. He's threatening you, on your wedding day. Alexander let out a short, humorless laugh. This isn't a threat, it's a promise. Winters has been looking for leverage since day one. He doesn't care about me, he doesn't care about Natasha, he cares about his investment. The light flickered overhead, and for a heartbeat, Lena saw his face as if in a lightning flash. Hard, cold, haunted. You could still make it, Lena said, though the words felt like glass in her throat. If they fix the elevator in time, if you run, he repeated, as if testing the word. He stood abruptly, pacing the cramped space, his shoulders hitting the walls. Run to what? To stand in front of 300 people and make a promise I don't mean? To spend the rest of my life chained to a decision I didn't choose? He stopped pacing and turned to face her, his voice suddenly sharp. Do you think I haven't thought about this, Lena? Every single night for months, I've wondered if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life. And every morning I put on the suit, go to the office, and tell myself it's for the company, for my father's legacy, for everyone who depends on me. Lena stood now too, her back straight despite the claustrophobic space. And what about you? When do you get to depend on yourself? When do you get to choose something because it makes you happy, not because it keeps 100 shareholders happy? He stared at her, breathing hard. The question seemed to ricochet around the elevator, impossible to escape. I don't know how to do that, he admitted finally, his voice breaking. Yes, you do. Lena stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him, close enough to smell the faint trace of his cologne and adrenaline. You just did it. You told me the truth. You let yourself want something, someone, for the first time in years. He looked at her like she was something dangerous and beautiful all at once. If I walk away, I destroy everything, he said, quieter now. The deal, my father's approval, my company's future. And if you don't, Lena cut in, you destroy yourself. Is that the man you want to be? A man who can build skyscrapers but can't stand in his own truth? For a long, terrible moment, the elevator felt like a courtroom. Her words the final argument, his silence the verdict. His phone buzzed again, breaking the spell. This time it was a call. His father's name lit Tia. He screamed. Alexander stared at it for 3 rings, then answered, pressing it to his ear. Dad? Lena could hear Richard Vale's voice, deep and commanding even through the tinny speaker. Son, I heard what happened. Are you safe? Yes. Stuck, but safe. There was a pause. Then, Alexander, listen to me carefully. If you don't want to marry her, don't. Alexander's head jerked back. What? The Singapore deal came through yesterday, his father said. We don't need Winter's money anymore. I should have told you sooner, but I thought you loved her. I didn't want to interfere. Alexander went very still. We're fine, Richard continued. Financially secure. For once in your life, stop thinking about the company and think about yourself. If you marry her, make sure it's because you want to, not because you think the business will collapse if you don't. The line went quiet except for the faint hum of static. When Alexander ended the call, the elevator felt suddenly airless. His entire body seemed to shift, the weight of expectation sliding off him all at once. You're free, Lena said softly. He turned to her slowly, almost like a man waking from a long sleep. Free, he repeated, the word tasting strange in his mouth. He took a step closer, and then another, until there was no space left between them. If I call it off, he said, his voice low, dangerous. If I walk out of this elevator and tell the world the truth, I lose the version of me they've always wanted. The perfect son, the perfect CEO, the perfect groom. Maybe, Lena said, her voice trembling but steady. But you might find the version of you you've been missing all along. The elevator groaned above them, a sign that the maintenance team was working to free them. Soon the doors would open. Soon this choice would no longer be theoretical. Alexander's hand found hers again, his grip tight. Then what? He asked. What happens if I choose you? Her answer was almost a whisper. Then everything changes. And for the first time all morning, Alexander Vale smiled. Not the polished CEO smile for the cameras, but something raw, wild, almost reckless. Good, he said, because I'm done living someone else's life. The elevator shuddered, the first sign of motion in nearly an hour. The world outside was waiting, and for the first time, so was Alexander Vale. The elevator lurched once, then settled again. The faint hum of power suggested the building was coming back to life, but the maintenance team still hadn't freed them. Lena sat back against the wall, pulse hammering, watching Alexander pace like a caged predator. This is it, he said finally, pulling his phone from his pocket. No more delays, no more pretending. I have to do this now. Lena's chest tightened. You're sure? He turned toward her, his expression fierce, illuminated by the amber glow. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He dialed. The line rang once, twice, and then Natasha's voice filled the elevator, sharp and clipped. Alex, please tell me you're out by now. The music is about to start. My father is... Natasha, he said, cutting her off, his tone steady in a way Lena had never heard before. I need you to listen to me. There was a pause on the other end, the background murmur of guests fading to silence. I can't marry you, Alexander said. The words fell into the space between them like a dropped stone, sending invisible ripples through her. Oh, the world outside. The silence stretched. Then Natasha's voice rose, brittle and disbelieving. What are you talking about? You're just panicking. It's the wedding nerves. It's not nerves. His voice was calm, unyielding. I should have told you sooner, but I can't stand at that altar and lie. Not to you, not to myself. You're breaking up with me? Her voice cracked, the first real tremor of emotion breaking through. On our wedding day? While you're stuck in an elevator? I'm sorry, he said softly, his hand pressed against the wall like he needed the cold metal to steady him. You deserve someone who loves you completely, and I'm not that man. There was a sharp inhale, followed by words like broken glass. Do you have any idea what you've just done? The money, the merger, my family. I know, he said, his tone firmer now. And I'll deal with the fallout. But you shouldn't have to be collateral damage in my life. You deserve better than a husband who looks at another woman and wonders what if. Lena's breath caught, her throat tightening as Natasha's voice turned icy. Another woman, Natasha repeated. So that's what this is, there's someone else. Alexander hesitated. Yes. The single word was a detonation. Natasha laughed then, a sharp, brittle sound. I hope she was worth it, Alex. I hope she's worth burning down everything your father built, everything we built. She is, he said simply. The line went dead. Alexander stood there for a moment, phone still in his hand, as if bracing for the next aftershock. Then he exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and grief, and slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, head tipped back, eyes closed. Lena didn't move at first. The air was thick with the weight of what had just happened. That was brutal, she said finally, her voice gentle. She deserved brutal honesty, Alexander said, opening his eyes. I've been lying to her, to myself, for too long. At least now she can be free of me. Lena crossed the small space and sat beside him. For a moment they didn't speak, just breathing in sync, the hum of the elevator around them. You just changed everything, Lena whispered. I know. He turned his head toward her, a small, incredulous smile tugging at his mouth. I feel like I should be terrified right now, but I'm not. Because you finally told the truth, she said softly. He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. Because I finally started living my own life. The elevator shuddered again, this time more violently. A voice crackled through the emergency speaker. Mr. Vale, Ms. Harper, we've restored power. We're bringing the car down manually. You'll be out in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, the doors would open, and the world outside, the board, the press, Natasha's family, would be waiting with questions, accusations, consequences. And for the first time, Lena realized she wasn't afraid of what came next. Alexander squeezed her hand. When those doors open, he said, I'm not walking out the same man I was when I stepped in here. Lena's heart pounded. Good, she whispered, because I'm not walking out the same woman either. The elevator began to move, a slow, grinding descent that felt like falling into the future. The elevator creaked and groaned as it descended, every second stretching impossibly long. Lena's heart hammered so hard she wondered if Alexander could hear it. His hand never left hers, their fingers interlocked like they had been waiting years for this moment of quiet solidarity. When the car stopped and the doors shuttered open, the world beyond was no longer the familiar sterile lobby. It was a wall of flashing cameras, security guards, frantic assistants, and the panicked voice of his best man, shouting something about delaying the ceremony as long as possible. Alexander stepped forward first, straightening his jacket with a precision that looked more like armor than grooming. He turned back to Lena and without hesitation reached for her hand again. You don't have to do this, she whispered, her breath catching. I know, he said, his eyes locked on hers. That's why I'm going to. He stepped out into the lobby, pulling her with him. The flashbulbs erupted like gunfire. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Is the wedding still happening? Where's Natasha Winters? Who is she? Alexander didn't flinch. For a man who had just detonated the most expensive engagement in Manhattan society, he looked strangely calm, almost regal. The wedding is canceled, he said clearly, his voice carrying over the chaos, effective immediately. The lobby went silent for half a breath, the collective inhale of a city hungry for scandal, and then the noise exploded. Canceled? Why? Did she call it off? Who's the woman with you? Alexander's gaze never wavered as he drew Lena closer to his side. Her name, he said, each word deliberate, is Lena Harper. She's one of the most talented architects in this city. And yes, she's the woman I love. Lena's breath caught audibly. Around them, the crowd seemed to freeze for a beat, processing the headline that had just been handed to them on a silver platter. You're leaving Natasha Winters for your employee? A reporter shouted. I'm leaving a marriage that was never meant to be, Alexander said, his voice firm but not cruel. Natasha deserves someone who loves her completely, and so do I. I've been living for everyone else's expectations for too long. Today, I'm choosing something different. I'm choosing honesty. I'm choosing love. Lena's knees went weak, but she stayed where she was, her chin lifted despite the storm of flashbulbs. A security guard tried to usher them through the crowd, but Alexander stopped just long enough to squeeze Lena's hand and murmur, "You still okay?" She nodded, though her heart felt like it was going to burst. "I think I was born for this moment," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. They pushed through the chaos together and out into the street where a sleek black car was already waiting. The driver opened the door, but instead of getting in, Alexander turned to Lena right there on the sidewalk, as if the entire city wasn't watching. "Lena," he said, his voice low but carrying, "I just tore my life apart in front of everyone I know, and I don't regret it. But I need to know, do you want to be part of what I build next?" Her throat tightened. "Alexander." "No," he interrupted softly, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Not as my employee. Not as my secret. As my partner. In everything." The street was quiet now, as though even Manhattan itself was holding its breath. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. She thought of all the nights she'd stayed late, all the mornings she'd forced herself to smile through meetings while her heart broke in silence. She thought of how this morning had started. Ordinary, lonely, safe. And then she thought of this man standing in front of her, stripped bare of every mask, asking her to help him build something new. "Yes," she whispered, and the word catching in her throat, then stronger, "Yes." Alexander kissed her then, right there on the sidewalk, in full view of cameras and chaos and the entire city. It wasn't tentative or shy. It was the kiss of a man who had made a choice and meant it. A man who had walked through fire and come out the other side unafraid. When they finally broke apart, she realized the world around them was cheering. Reporters, bystanders, even a few of the staff who had run downstairs to see the drama. Alexander glanced at her, a wicked glint in his gray eyes. "Well," he said, "I guess that's our press statement." She laughed then, dizzy with relief, with terror, with joy. "You just started a scandal that's going to dominate headlines for weeks." "Good," he said, pulling her toward the waiting car. "Let them talk. I'd rather be infamous for telling the truth than celebrated for living a lie." As the car door shut behind them and the driver pulled away from the curb, Lena looked back at the building that had held her for so long, her job, her quiet longing, her unspoken dreams. It wasn't a cage anymore. It was the place where everything had begun. And as the city lights streaked past, Alexander laced his fingers through hers and said quietly, "Next time we get stuck in an elevator, I hope it's because we're building one together." Lena smiled, tears still shining in her eyes. "Deal." The city roared around them, but inside the car, it was just the two of them, heading toward a future that no longer scared either of them, a future they had chosen.